Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Tyrone Squires. I am Managing Director of Transparent RX. And the title of the webinar, you should be able to see there from your desk. Just a little bit about me. I've also got with us today, Day Lee, who is a partner in one of the preeminent pharmacy, Day, I guess you would call it, law firms in the country. And I'll let him tell you a little bit about himself when we get to his part. But here's of the presentation. But here's what I want you to know about me, folks. I've been in the pharmacy industry for the better part of 2 decades. And I started out as a pharmaceutical sales rep with Eli Lilly. I somehow finagled my way into the corporate offices where I led an access team that was charged with getting our branded products onto the PBMs formulary. So I've sat at that table and negotiated with PBMs and paying rebates back to them to get our products onto their formulary. Always wanted to be an entrepreneur. After about 4.5 years with Eli Lilly, I went out on my own, started a mail order pharmacy, and ran that from about 2006 to the tail end of 2009, going into 2010, where we sold the business, which essentially equates to selling the claims. I was frustrated by having to be squeezed between PBMs and the poor reimbursements that independents receive. I can still remember like it was yesterday. The first contract that we signed, it was with one of the big three. I won't point fingers. Well, I can't say I won't point fingers, so we're going to do a lot of that today. But one of the big three, where the reimbursement for brands was AWP -2, can't make a -22, can't make a living that way. And then also negotiating with drug wholesalers. I know what those master agreements look like. I know that they look good on the front end, but then over time, they make their profits by steadily increasing the cost of goods. And so became frustrated by how the system worked, decided if can't beat them, join them. And so I decided to do it different and start the first fiduciary model PBM in the country. And so that's the agenda for today. And so if you have any questions for us, everyone is muted. If you have questions, send them via chat. We'll get to those when we have a break in the action. Or there's a raised hand feature on your control panel. So if you raise your hand here, we will unmute you and we will give you the floor where you can elaborate on what the information we're sharing today. You can disagree, you can agree, but let's have that conversation if you're pondering critically what we're sharing with you today. So let's get right into it. Price is obviously a concern for self-funded employers, any third-party payer for that matter, around the pharmacy benefit. And it's going to become even more of a concern moving forward as specialty drugs become a larger share of the claims file for these plan sponsors. So what I'm going to be talking about today is that addressing that concern, that problem, doesn't start with getting bigger discount guarantees off of AWP. It doesn't, and while that's important, the process of solving that problem doesn't start with that. It doesn't start with negotiating bigger minimum rebate guarantees from pharmacy benefit managers. That process starts with eliminating information asymmetry. Information asymmetry simply means this, and I'm going to give you a prime example of that hit my inbox. I think it was last year. Information asymmetry simply says this: when one party has access to information that another party doesn't have access to, the party with the information, not just the information, with the better skill set or more knowledge to interpret that information. So they've got more information, better information, and they've got better knowledge around how to interpret that information, they leverage that to their financial advantage. And that's what's been happening in the relationships between non-fiduciary PBMs and their clients. The reason that non-fiduciary PBMs engage in information asymmetry is that their clients, you, are more willing to overpay when you don't have the information. It's easier to get away from a PBM perspective with overcharging when the clients don't have the information that they need to ascertain whether or not that fee is fair. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And so here's the status quo. And let me sum this up for you. Plan sponsors, large self-funded groups, small, medium self-funded groups, coalitions, the federal government, state governments, you'll see that an example of that here today, coalitions, unions, health systems. They enter into an agreement with a pharmacy benefit manager that calls for artificially too low administrative fees. Because these fees are artificially too low, that gives the PBM, the non-fiduciary PBM, the green light to augment those artificially too low admin fees in the back end. And that augmentation is undisclosed. Now, when I say artificially too low, what I'm suggesting is, on average, any administrative fee below $6 per paid claim, and you could factor that out to a PEPM or PMPM, whatever metric you use. But all three of those are easily accounted for. You can account for those fees. They're radically transparent, which is why non-fiduciary PBMs either charge no administrative fee or artificially too low, below $6 per paid claim. Now, I don't want you to run out and say, hey, Tyrone said if you're charging $5.50 per paid claim, you got to be making it up in the back end through hidden cash flows. What I'm saying to you is, the further away you get from that $6 per paid claim, the more likely the PBM is augmenting that admin fee. Now, on the flip side, you can't also assume that if a PBM is charging $8 or $9 or $10 per paid claim, that they too aren't engaging in hidden cash flows to their organization. It's all going to boil down to the contract language. But for sure, when you get to $2 per paid claim or no administrative fee, you can book it. The PBM is generating its service fee, its management fee, primarily through those three buckets. Now, it doesn't always come in a pretty box like this. This hidden artificially too low administrative fee and then the augmentation. It didn't always come pretty. Sometimes it's more complicated than this. For example, the PBM says, we want you, here's what we'll do for you to help your cash flow. You forego a % of your pharmacy rebates, or you forego all of your pharmacy rebates, and you know that medical TPA administrative fee you pay every month, we're going to give you a credit to that. We're going to use those rebates and give you a credit on that fee. It's the same game, different name. Same game, different name. Always like to provide a little proof. State of Ohio, unlimited resources, spends billions of dollars in their Medicaid program every year through pharmacy benefits. Every year up until about 2018, they went in with the same mindset, the status quo. Give us a better discount on AWP. And organizations that size usually negotiate on ASP at a minimum. They start at ASP. It'll be a lesser of methodology. The lesser of AWP minus MAC, ASP, UNC, right? So that's how they negotiate. But the point being is, up until 2018, they would ask for bigger discounts off the pricing, whether it's a list price or a price like ASP, which reflects actual transactional costs. They ask for a bigger discount and ask for bigger rebates. In 2000, but still costs would continue to go up. So in 2018, decided, you know what? We need a better understanding of what we're paying you. We need a better understanding of what we're paying you. And when they gained that knowledge, that information, what they discovered was $224 million just in spreads in 1 year to these two organizations. Now, if Greg were here today, to a woman, to a man, he would tell you, and this is not hearsay, it's not necessarily information we've never had before. It's information they never demanded before. It's information they never considered in the evaluation of their PBM's performance. It's almost as if buyers were afraid to ask, what are we paying you? It wasn't until drug costs got completely out of hand and specialty drugs hit the scene that folks decided, you know what, enough is enough. What's going on here? And so when they uncovered that $224 million, they terminated the contracts almost overnight. If it can happen to the state of Ohio, what's happening with an employer with 200 employees or 2,000 employees or 20,000 employees? What's happening there? Generally speaking, obviously some employers are better at managing pharmacy benefits than others, but generally speaking, there's a big problem that needs to be solved. And we're telling you what that problem is today. I talked about ingredient costs and spreads. By the way, spreads are not an accident, they are intentional. A spread is the difference between what a plan sponsor is being billed for a prescription claim and what the PBM reimburses or pays the pharmacy for that same prescription claim. Any difference, the PBM keeps. Any difference, the PBM keeps. From a rebate perspective, the process is similar, sort of. It's similar. And so PBMs negotiate with pharmaceutical manufacturers for refunds, or in other words, rebates. And the pharmaceutical manufacturers will say, we have a finite amount of dollars that we're going to pay. They're not going to, because a PBM has 10 different names for refunds or rebates, that doesn't mean that the manufacturer is going to increase the amount of money that they're willing to pay for these refunds. Those dollars are finite. And so in negotiations and primarily driven by PBMs, remember, I've been at that table. They will say, let's put 25% in formulary rebates Let's put 25% in market share rebates. Let's put another 25% in product discounts, and let's put another 25% in price protection rebates. And then the PBM wins a new client, and then that contract will then say, we're just going to pay you this, and we're going to keep this. That's supposed to be a dollar sign, by the way. And so, again, I like to show proof. This is a lawsuit that was filed by Express Scripts against Kaleo, who's a specialty drug manufacturer. Express Scripts sued this manufacturer because it refused to pay rebates that Express Scripts believed were owed to them. I got no doubt that these Kaleo owed Express Scripts this money. Kaleo probably didn't believe that Express Scripts would sue and make this information public, which it is, and you can go out and find it, and it's redacted, but there was an attorney, and not Day, and no one at his firm, by the way, that through the redaction was able to still come up with these numbers. They're not assumptions. And so what we learned is that the formulary rebate was being dwarfed by an administrative fee. This is not the same administrative fee I was discussing up front around the artificially too low administrative fee. That administrative fee is for electronic claims adjudication, having an account manager, a 24-hour call center, a member web portal, a member app. That's what that administrative fee is for. This administrative fee has nothing to do with that one. But any reasonable person would believe that they're the same, and they're not. Information asymmetry. And so this administrative fee was agreed upon between the PBM and the manufacturer. The manufacturer issued refunds to the PBM for administrative fees. We're going to get into the contract specifics here in a bit. They will, but well, you might say, well, Tyrone, what are you doing? This is from 2016. What are you doing, Tyrone? Well, this is what I know, and you've heard it before. If you don't recall, remember your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And anyway, this wasn't publicized until I think 2019, maybe, right? So, but if you're one of those that needs up-to-date information, this was released by the state of Texas. Everyone's demanding more transparency now from PBMs. The state of Texas required PBMs doing business in their state to report the rebates that they are taking in. And so while those PBMs will tell you, we're pass through. Or they say, oh yeah, we keep rebates, but we only keep 5%. We only keep 3%. We only keep 5%. Just imagine for a second a drug that a manufacturer, we're talking specialty now, that is $10,000 per month. And the manufacturer has agreed to pay a 20% rebate on that. In 2019 and 2020, those PBMs were keeping $2,000 of that. That's your money. That's your client's money. As important as the financial implications of 2,000 out of every 10 going to the PBM, for what? For what? But just as important is not knowing what the amount actually is. This is an email to me, and this director of compensation and benefits is the director of compensation and benefits for an insurance carrier. Regional, albeit, but with 30,000 employees themselves. And they had entered into an agreement where they couldn't even get their own claims data. This is 1 year ago. This is 1 year ago. PBMs need partners to pull this off. They need partners to pull this off. So without that claims data, what types of smart decisions can a buyer make without the information? That is what allows PBMs to put in their bank accounts $224 million. It is what allows them to pass on just formulary rebates, but keeping manufacturer administrative fees, market share rebates, product discounts, access rebates, price protection rebates. Don't get me started on outcomes rebates. That's a webinar for another day. Everything I just showed you were examples of information asymmetry, or in other words, information failure. This is an example of information success. So any PBM that claims to be fiduciary or radically transparent around rebates and ingredient costs, drug claims, has got to provide some sort of receipt, some sort of remittance with a bunch of detail for rebates and ingredient costs for electronic claims. It helps to understand the net cost of each claim. Isn't that what this is about? Trying to get the lowest net cost. Also, we want to improve outcomes and all that, but improving outcomes starts with being efficient around cost. So you can see here, just so all of our clients get this when we pay rebates. All of this here is redacted for this purpose, but it's populated when we share this information with our clients. But you can see here what claims were eligible. The contract says we can't hide any of this. We can't play games. And if we do, you can sue us. Dave's going to talk about the exact opposite of what PBMs do in their contracts here in a second. But this is information success. This is information symmetry. It is powerful when clients demand this level of detail from both their consultants who are advising them and shouldn't allow them to get into deals where they can't get access to this type of information, and the PBMs.
All right, thanks, Tyrone. Hope everybody's doing great and having a great start of the new year. My name is Dae Lee. I'm one of the pharmacist attorney at Fryer Levitt. My firm represent pharmacy providers as well as other healthcare providers. We also represent plan sponsor and employers. We have absolutely zero conflict as to representing our clients against top 10 PBMs that are now, actually top 3 that are now dominating that have been dominating the industry. Before we dive into the slides, I just want to give you a quick disclaimer that the contents of this webinar and the opinion that I'm giving is not legal opinion. It's for only educational purposes. And I'm going to show you throughout this webinar a contract provisions that I pulled from publicly available plan sponsor and PBM agreements. Okay, so what are we looking at right now? Vertical integration. So vertical integration has allowed, as you may know, major and non-transparent PBMs to essentially control the supply chain. Critically, just 3 PBM, CVS Caremark, Express Scripts, and OptumRx, process over, 70 to 80% of all prescription claims in the United States. So through vertical integration, these PBMs or their subsidiaries or affiliates, whatever they call, including rebate aggregator, specialty pharmacies, mail order pharmacies, and or their retail pharmacies, which increase their their control over the entire supply chain, in turn, their overall profitability. Also, this vertical integration makes it much easier to keep the full extent of their profits hidden from, obviously both from the providers as well as the plan sponsors. Next slide, please. So why does vertical integration matter to plans and plan sponsors? As I just mentioned, because of vertical integration and their control of the supply chain, PBMs keep plans and plan sponsors in the dark as to hidden cash flows the PBMs receive. So take this diagram, for example. When Caremark enters into a PBM agreement with plan sponsors, it may include provisions purporting to pass through 100% of rebates Caremark received to the plan sponsor. However, what the plan sponsor doesn't know is that Caremark is only receiving a portion of the actual rebates because its subcontracted rebate aggregator, their own, Zinc, may be keeping a portion of rebates for themselves. And Caremark could and may also subcontracted out the rebate aggregation function to the rebate aggregators, to other rebate aggregators, such as MSR that is owned by Optum, Ascent Health that is owned by Express Scripts, and which allows the rebate aggregators to keep a portion unbeknownst to the plan sponsor. And to illustrate the extent of the money PBMs can withhold from their clients, in March 2021, Ohio's Attorney General, David Yost, who used to be the auditor, filed a lawsuit against Centene and its subcontractors and affiliates, claiming breach of contract and unfair business practices on behalf of Ohio Department of Medicaid. And as you know, Centene is the largest managed care organization that are tasked with managing the prescription drug benefits for Medicaid, state Medicaid programs. And in the complaint, the AG alleged that the subcontractors improperly submitted claims for reimbursement that already been paid out by other third parties, and falsifying the cost of the pharmacy services, artificially inflating the dispensing fees, That really opened the floodgate, and Centene entered into a settlement with Ohio. I think the settlement amount was $88 million. And Centene also entered into settlements with at least 12 other states, including 166 million settlement with Texas for similar conduct. And Centene actually reserved 1.25 billion to pay future settlement with other state Medicaid agencies. So Tyrone talked about spread. So I want to dive a little bit into what that means and, give you an example of how it actually plays out. So what you're looking at here is a blank check on spread pricing provision in the PBM agreement. So the provision says on mail order drugs, specialty drugs, and retail pharmacy drugs and services, including dispensing fees, administrator, that is the PBM, will retain the difference between what the administrator reimbursed the network pharmacy and the customer, that is the plan sponsor. So plan sponsor is giving the PBM a blank check on those prescription claims and the reimbursement. So to give you a number example, let's say a claim is, PBM pays out $10 for a drug product to a pharmacy, and in turn, PBM charges the plan sponsor $20. Then the plan sponsor pays $20. PBM keeps the $10, which is the delta, and that becomes pure profit. That is a classic example of spread pricing tactic on prescription claims. Next slide. So let's talk about rebates. As Tyrone indicated, there are PBMs can throw in or categorize rebates in many different buckets and attach different names to it. But at the end of the day, rebates are the pricing discount that manufacturers offer to PBMs. And so in exchange of having the manufacturer's drug to be placed on the PBM's formulary, that will be ultimately dispensed to the plan members and beneficiary. Through their agreement with plan sponsors, the PBMs are supposed to share a portion of the rebates that they receive, whether it be 100% pass through or fixed percentage or a flat fee, meaning fixed dollar amount, usually per claim. However, that's not really what's happening, even though PBM can say, oh, we're passing through all the rebates that we receive. As you can see here, that's the prime example of typical rebate provision that I saw in many of the publicly available PBM agreement that the top three enter into with different public agencies. So as you can see, PBM will pay customer, the plan, 100% of rebates that administrator receives. Okay, that's the key. Administrator receive, meaning the PBM receives. Okay. Next slide. Now, this is an example of how PBMs use rebate aggregators to mask the actual flow of the rebates. And this is a real life example, and I got I got this diagram, or I created this diagram using the audit report issued by Broward County on rebates that are managed by OptumRx. Unbeknownst to the Broward County, what Optum did was Optum subcontracted its rebate function to its own rebate aggregator. At that time, it was called Coalition for Advanced Pharmacy Services, who then subcontracted rebate aggregation function to ESI. So what Optum did was Optum passed the portion of the rebate that it received to Broward County, and it did not disclose the rebates that its rebate aggregator and ESI received and retained. So Broward County did not get the full value of the rebate that they're supposed to receive. Next slide, please. So moving away from rebates, so how can a plan sponsor really monitor the PBM's function? One of the way is audit, right? Auditing PBM performance, is critical. Oftentimes, I mean, it's really the only way to know whether the PBM is fulfilling its obligation in accordance with the bargain for terms of the contract, and whether the PBM is keeping certain cash flows hidden from their plan sponsor. Okay. So regular audits of a PBM are a tool to plan sponsors. However, if you take a look at this provision, there's like tons of restrictions being placed on the plan sponsor's right to audit. For example, the plan can only audit the PBM once per year. The audit is subject to confidentiality, and the audit must be conducted by a mutually agreeable entity, meaning PBM or pro-PBM auditor. And in some egregious cases, PBM mandates that the auditor not to share any notes with the plan sponsor. Okay, and with respect to rebate audits, sometimes they limit the auditor to be only the Big Four accounting firm. Okay, and so it's really critical for plan sponsors to have a broad and reserve their rights through the crafting of the right audit provision. And the other way is, setting up a fiduciary arrangement, okay, making sure that PBM is a fiduciary. And, PBMs, traditional PBMs and non-transparent PBMs, it really go beyond the reasonableness and they really take efforts to make sure that the PBM agreements say that the PBM is not a fiduciary, okay? Because fiduciary status, it really imposes highest standards that can be imposed upon a PBM performing a PBM's performance under that PBM agreement. Is when fiduciary status is imposed, the PBM must act solely and exclusively in the interest of the plan sponsor client. Okay, so in other words, it must promote the interest of the plan sponsor client above its own interest. Well, we don't really see that happening with the top 3 PBMs, at least with respect to the contract that I've seen that are publicly available. Okay, and naturally, PBMs do everything, like I said, everything they can do to prevent fiduciary status from being imposed upon them. Okay, and and hopefully, and as the states and the industry have been changing and developing, we see more of a transparent relationship and fiduciary duty imposed upon PBM. Okay, and the other item that I wanted to talk about is not the spread on the prescription claims and not the rebate revenue that PBMs are keeping, is the audit money that they're keeping. So PBMs, they generally conduct, audits of their network pharmacy, claiming that, they do this as a way to identify and prevent potential fraud, waste, and abuse, and any incidents of overpayment. That's fine. I respect the concept. However, that practice has been abused as a profit center for PBM. So let's say, for example, this pharmacy, right? Let's say PBM identify $100,000 worth of discrepant claims, okay? And they're not only going to recoup that $100,000, but PBM can charge up north of 25% of the discrepant amount as their fee, okay? So PBM is going to collect 125, okay? And PBM is may also charge 25% of the discrepant amount as a fee as a fee to the plan. So the PBM keeps the most, and PBM relays 75,000 to the plan sponsor. So here PBM, made essentially 50,000 out of the fees alone. However, just so you know, PBMs, subject to the terms in a PBM agreement, they may not even need to pass the discrepant amount to the plan sponsor, okay? And they may not even have an active contract with the plan sponsor when they audit the pharmacy, because when they audit pharmacies, they look at claims 2 or 3 years that are old, meaning that are already paid, and pharmacies that those claims that have been already dispensed by the pharmacy. So, pharmacy audit and the audit amount is another profit center for traditional PBMs and non-transparent PBMs. Next slide, please.
And by the way, I will say, Day and I have had this discussion um, uh, uh, in the past. I'm in the camp that there should be a fee, but it should be transparent. If
Yes.
the people, they shouldn't be double dipping, but if they catch a pharmacy uh, uh, that's doing fraud, and the PBM, I believe, should get a percentage of what they find, provided it's legitimate, but it should go back to the plan.
Yes, I have, I echo your Tyrone's statement and comments. Look, I have, I don't think spread, the concept is, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. As long as it's transparent and as long as there is a reasonable ceiling to it. Okay, and same as rebates, the rebate aggregators, might be necessary, right, to streamline the logistics between the manufacturer and the PBMs, rebate aggregators, and their clients, which are plan sponsors. And I have nothing against PBMs for charging the audit fees as long as they're reasonable and as long as those are fully disclosed. Okay.
So share with us, Day, and this is just educational. Because I don't want my clients to look at our contract and say this is unreasonable, this is bad. What if you were advising a pharmacy, what would be reasonable in your mind?
Well, it depends on the amount. I mean, if it's let's say there's $100,000 audit, right? And let's say the PBM there's only 50 100 claims associated with it. That I'm just exaggerating, right? If you look at the per claim value, and then we from our end, we could really tell how many kind of project or budget how many hours that the PBM actually spent on auditing these claims, issuing the findings, and trying to get into the dispute resolution procedure. Okay, if the PBM charge, I've seen, audit findings up north of $1 million. Okay, and these audit findings involve, one or two discrepancy types. It's all repetitive, and let's say they charge $250,000. I doubt that their time spent is anywhere close to that $250,000. And to me, that's egregious.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to look at, and I agree with you, because that's what we ask of our vendors as well, right? So if you do a percent, so let's say you do 25% is a fee, that 25% has to have a cap.
Right.
Like you can't take 25% of $1 million, 25% up to the capped amount that we agree on. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Or some other way to
Yeah.
Okay. And industry is really moving towards transparency, which is good. And recently the Consolidated Appropriation Act of 2021 has been implemented. So there are the government, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Treasury mandated plan sponsors, employers, including self-funded plan sponsors, to submit a report on their prescription drug spend. And these reports include, 50 most frequently dispensed brand drug, 50 costless prescription drugs, rebates, and impact of prescription drug rebates, fees, and other remuneration on premiums as well as out-of-pocket costs. Okay. Well, as I said, we represent plan sponsors, and some of the plan sponsors flat out told me, "Hey, we're not getting the data." from our PBM, some of which include those top three, because their top three, the top three PBMs are saying to some of the plan sponsors that, hey, these are the data that these are not your data, these are our data. We're going to submit on your behalf. I mean, which doesn't make sense, meaning that doesn't make sense as to the ownership of the data, because at the end of the day, it's plan sponsors' claims. So in any event, the PBM said, we will submit it on your behalf. Otherwise, we're just going to send you raw data. You can figure it out. So that does not make sense. And that is indicative of non-transparency. They're trying to hide something. I'm sure they're trying to hide all the monies that they make. And also, you know, they're trying to hide the broker fees that they've been paid out, incentivized broker fees. So
that is information asymmetry at its best.
Exactly.
That is the definition. Even with federal laws, they're still trying to hold on to information asymmetry. And so and stay with me here. This has been a really, I don't know what you guys think. I'm sure you'll give some feedback once we conclude. Thanks, Dave. And so I'm getting better at this kind of presenting, moderating thing, Dave. But
Thank you.
so know the PBM take rate. I hadn't talked about that phrase until 2023. And that's all I'm going to be talking about in 2023. Know the PBM take rate. What is the percentage of you or your client's cost the PBM is keeping in its own bank account? That's the take rate. Now, the whole dollar amount is called the earnings after cash disbursements. So I talked about up front, AWP discounts are important. Whatever the benchmark, NADAC, AWP, ASP, MAC, UNC, whatever the benchmark, those are important. But more important than those is because, so everybody's getting really the same discounts and rebates. Really, that's not the differentiator in how a PBM is performing financially. Everything that is in green lands in the PBM's bank account. In red are revenues or cash that leaves the PBM's bank account, a share of manufacturer rebates passed back to the plan. When the PBM reimburses a pharmacy, that's a cash disbursement. Whatever is left over is what the PBM is paying itself. As a PBM, we go to manufacturers, we go to pharmacy network chains and pharmacy services administrative organizations, and we negotiate discounts on ingredient costs, and we negotiate refunds from the manufacturer. That's what we do. The differentiator between PBMs that are radically transparent and fiduciary and those that aren't is what part of what we negotiate do we pass on? Rebates, important. Negotiated discounts on ingredient costs, important. But they are being used as distractions from this. That's all we've been talking about today. They're being used as distractions from the earnings after cash disbursements. The new path says this: buyers of PBM services enter into an agreement that calls for a reasonable administrative fee. That's the only way the PBM is going to make money. And it's got to say that in the contract. So I talked about information asymmetry. You got to have the info and you have to have the knowledge and skills to interpret the information that you have. If you don't have that expertise, hire someone who does. The ROI on that is at least 10x. If you don't have it, hire someone who does. And I'm not going to make any friends by saying this, Mark, and some of you other brokers on here today. Don't assume that your PBM consultant or benefits broker is an expert in this. I teach it. I know. So when the PBM makes money one way, then the trade-off now, instead of a $2 per paid claim or PPM or whatever it is, now you're paying above $6, $7, $8 PPM or per paid claim, whatever you want to factor it out to. But then all the undisclosed cash flows to the PBM go away. This doesn't work if you don't get the data. This is still a client with us today. We brought them on like right in the beginning stages of the pandemic, but they're still a client today. And so what happens is, and let me just get this out of the way, it's kind of a little sidebar. But when you go from a PBM that is not truly passed through, not radically transparent, not fiduciary, you know, maybe your PBM is about $90, right, on average. And then you shop around and you find a PBM and you've got an expert that says, yep, there are no undisclosed cash flows here, and we're going to get all the data information we need to verify that that is in fact the case. And that PBM is going to let you out in 90 days notice anytime you want if you're unhappy. And so when you shop around, you find one of those PBMs, say you're at $90 PPM, all in, ingredient costs, your step therapy, your prior authorizations, your appeals, your disease management program, your $90 PPM. You link up with a PBM that doesn't participate in hiding cash flows for its financial gain, and then now it drops to $45 PM. But then what happens is, over time, it starts to creep back up. That's just what happens. So the PBM has to be on its P's and Q's, continuously trying to innovate to keep those costs from getting out of hand and trying to keep them as flat as possible. This client came in 2020, 5788. In the first year, we got them down to $23.12. The $35 PM, and this is horrible, PM difference between us and Prime is the earnings after cash disbursements. It's the earnings after cash disbursements. That $35 PM is revenue to Prime, and primarily through its specialty and mail pharmacies. So not their net income, not their EBITDA, revenue to them. But to you, it is dollar for dollar cost. Again, I like to provide proof. Reach out to him, ask him, he'll tell you. And so that is our time today. We're going to stick around just in case any questions come around. Day, I appreciate you. We do this once per quarter. Tell anyone who wants to listen and learn about this. We'll be back here in March. Thank you for your time. Everyone be safe.
Thanks, Tyrone.